Thank you very much for inviting me. And for the Romanians in the room, yeah, my name is Diana Stafie, so there is no misspelling in there. I'm happy that I will be hosting this first round of discussions with you. I know it's still early in the morning, and there are also other panels or events that you could go to, so we are happy that you have chosen to witness the future of automation, as Victor was saying. And to cut it short, I would like to also invite on the stage my two lovely guests. So we have, first of all, coming, can I say all the way from Malaysia, although you come from UK? So all the way from Malaysia through UK, we have Danny Go. So he's the CEO of Nexus Frontier Tech, which is an AI research firm that leverages artificial intelligence in order to make processes in the companies leaner, faster, and better. He's also an entrepreneur, investing in a lot of early stage startups, mentorship as well. And he also co-written a book, which is called The AI Republic, a book about the nexus between humans and the intelligent automation. If I missed something, please, yes. Welcome, Danny. We welcome you on stage. Thank you very much for coming to Romania. We sandwiched you, so we're Romanian, Malaysian, and then a Romanian again. So I invite on the stage Gabriel Sidor. He comes from UiPath. Is anyone in the room that doesn't know UiPath? No, okay. So is our first official Romanian unicorn, is probably the most known company coming out of Romania, most known abroad. And Gabriel, if I may say that, Gabriel is an automation first evangelist. Yeah, you like this? Great, and then he advocates this automation first mindset. And in his current role at UiPath, what he does is building this automation immersion labs in order to enhance the collaboration between UiPath, their products, and the clients. Great, and if you ever want to turn your home into a smart home, there are just few people in Romania, at least that I know, that can tell you how to do it and how not to do it, and Gabriel is one of them. So if you want to make your home as a gadget, Gabriel can teach you a little bit more about that in let's say in the breaks or whenever you are curious. You didn't write anything about it, no? Okay, great. I invite you here, and if that's okay with you, I will also have a seat over there. How I plan to do this, like was also mentioned before, we have a short discussion, us learning a little bit about the experience of our guests and how they see automation, what could be opportunities and challenges, and then also taking into account that we are not such a big group, I will also invite you to post any type of questions that you might have, hopefully related to the subject. But if the time will allow us, we can have together a discussion. Now that you know us a little bit, what I would also like is if we know you a bit, and it will be really hard to go to each of you and understand who you are, or what do you think about the future, or what do you think about automation. So if it's okay with you, I would just take 2 more minutes and asking you 2 very short questions, and I would appreciate if you could help me in this. I know that the things cannot be black and white, but what I kindly ask you to do is to either stand up or sit, depending on the answer that you have to the question. So if I would to ask you, how do you see the future? We are at the Future Summit. You, for sure, are very curious and passionate about the future. But if I were to ask you, how do you see the future? Is future something that you think will be better or worse than today? And for those that think that will be better, I kindly ask you to stand up. Yes. Okay, we also have some people that stay like this. So those are the undecided ones. Yeah, you can have a seat now. And the last question, and you see this a little bit of physical activity, it's really good in the morning, keeps you in shape. So the last question is, we talk about automation on our panel today. But so if you were to look at technology, do you think that technology, from an individual perspective, you can have a look at it, do you think technology is setting us more apart, or it's actually bringing us more together as people? And now, if you think that technology is bringing us together, please again stand up. And if you think that it's actually separating us more, please stay down. Okay, thank you very much. So as we saw, gentlemen, we have different perspectives in the room about the future and technology. I have to confess that I do this exercise a lot of the times in workshops and presentations, and this is the feeling that I also get from there. We have different perspectives of how the future might be. We are optimistic or pessimistic. We have a lot of technology early adopters, or the ones that fear it, the ones that want to see it more used for good and more ethical way. And I really think that if we want to build our own future, it's very good to come with all this perspective, and we have to be inclusive of all these perspectives. So my first questions to you now, gentlemen, will be related to the fact that how you see the future. Is it the future something that will shine, or we have to be a little bit more concerned about it?
I think as a technologist, I of course believe that technology will improve people's life, humans' life, as in it will make our interaction a lot easier, and also improve the way how we live, how we behave ourselves. For example, you know, we move from the computer age to the mobile age, where we are a lot more flexible. But then another problem arises from the mobile age, where because you are so mobile with the mobile, you are so concentrating on your mobile rather than interacting with others. So what I believe is we are moving towards the automation world, where we are going to use less mobile, more automation. The moment I walk in here, or the moment I fly into Romania, my team and my wife should know that I'm actually in Romania, rather than me announcing to people on Twitter that I am in Bucharest. So this is the type of interactions, this is the type of improvement of how we interact with others in terms of the intelligence automation. Now, of course, the bad thing comes when a new thing arises. There's always new problem arise that we are yet to understand yet. And that I'm not going into it today, but there will definitely be more and more problems comes when new thing is installed into our life. So, for example, like the job loss, certain skills. To me, that's okay, because human never stop evolving. The computer was a job title 100 years ago, but now it's a tool. So, yeah.
I really believe that humans are great at putting on nostalgia glasses and thinking that something in the past was way better and great. I really believe that we are in the best of our times, like since the beginning of humanity, and we're moving forward to even better things. And the reason is, as a child, I remember when some relative was making a phone call to us, like it was a rare event. Your aunt from I don't know what city would call you once in 3 months, and it was a really, really rare event, and you would speak for 5-10 minutes because it was really expensive. So it's not that we're less connected now, or we want to say that we're less connected now because we're doing all these things on apps and mobile phones and emails and so on. We as humans are doing now 5x the amount of connection and data and work which we did in the past. It's only that we don't observe it, right? We're constantly texting with all our friends and our relatives. We're constantly sharing memories. We're constantly viewing other people's memories. We are more connected, indeed, than we used to be, right? It's not special, I get that anymore. It's not as special as it used to be. It doesn't bring us the same level of excitement because it's not a rarity anymore. It's standard right now. So this is why I think that technology in itself brings us a lot of new opportunity in a way which we really don't realize anymore, because we think that, you know, it was more meaningful in the past because every 6 months we met someone and we shake their hands. Now we do that every day through a digital platform.
If you all remember, we used to have those calls with reverse charge. Do you know that? Waiting for somebody to call. That feeling of waiting was also part of the entire experience, and sometimes we miss that. So like the title says, today we'll be discussing about automation. And in simple words, how we see automation is this technology through which a process, a procedure, just gets to be done without or very limited human assistance. But a lot of the times, and I heard you also mentioning, Danny, we hear automation, or we hear artificial intelligence, or we hear intelligent automation. And a lot of the times they are used interchangeable. So what I kindly ask you to do is to maybe elaborate more on what's the difference between all this. And then maybe we can get a little bit more specifics of it.
I, of course, come from the artificial intelligence perspective. And what we do is basically, rather than automation, we try to put a meaning into each of the move or process that we do. So I like to always give this example of, for example, when you try to train a 2-year-old kid to walk from here to there, if it is a robot, you will need to train it step by step. Exactly 30 angles to the left, 40 degrees angles to the right, and by certain degrees to each step. So you know the exact steps that it's moving on. But in AI, artificial intelligence, what we do is we set objective of going from here to there, but we don't know which way he or she will be going, or the object will be going. It will train itself to find all the possible routes to move there and find the best route or way to go there by itself. So that's what we call intelligence, in a part where all the steps that the AI moves are all within our expectations. It will not go to a different objective. But we simply do not want to waste our mind to lay out all the possibilities of moving from here to there. So that's my explanations of what AI does in a way of slightly intelligence in a way than a robot, to put it that way. Yeah.
I completely agree. Learning is a key feature, not just for technology, but for us as humans as well. And for those of you who have children, it's quickly a fact that you have to leave them to fall a few 100 times before they learn how to walk. It's very similar to these AIs. And if you've seen the Boston Dynamic robots, but the ones which are not the cool ones, like where it falls over and over like 1 billion times, and you say, look at that, it's struggling to even stand up. And the scientists are just leaving that little robot there to struggle, but that's the point. Eventually it will figure out on how to make the first step, and then the second and the third. From a UiPath perspective, AI, or human-like behavior in a technology, how we like to call it, is the confluence of multiple technology, and that is digital vision, so being able to look around you and understand your environment the way I do, and that applies to both physical environments but also digital ones, like understanding applications and documents and files and the place where you want that digital assistant to work. The ability to converse with a human counterpart, right? So being able to understand from a conversation what the intent is, what is the other person looking for to get out of the robot. The capability of learning, right, by observing, simply looking at a person doing a process or doing some steps and being able to learn. This is your key element in here. This is really important, so because if you are able to understand your environment, if you are able to learn from that environment by observing others doing it, if you are able to converse and ask for help in a natural way, then you will be able to create for a UiPath perspective, a digital assistant, a robot companion which will work with you in tandem, all right? So this is our vision of creating multiple technologies and putting them into a path of confluence so that at the end we have a human-like digital robot.
But help us understand a little bit more, Gabriel. So if we were working in an organization, like how do we choose those type of processes or procedures that we consider that can be further automated? Or if it's easier, just tell us a little bit more, like, which are the harder one to automate, or which are the easier one? Just going a little bit more specific.
So if you have met me in 2016 and I would have wanted to tell you what you should automate in your company, I would have told you need to find a place where you have a lot of employees doing the same labor over and over again. So a very classical approach was, do you have an accountant team? Yes. Are they processing invoices? Yes. I bet you have like thousands of invoices to process every month. Yes, I do, right? Because I'm a big company, so I work with thousands of vendors and so on. Okay, that's a menial task. It's a standard document. Obviously, it might have 1,000 shapes and forms, but in the end, the content, it's very much similar, like a total amount of VAT, some line items. So you have this more and more same content, and then you have to process that information into a payment application, be it SAP, be it Smart Bill, whatever, Excel, I don't care. Right? So that would have been the big go-to place for me. Go find a lot of work which is repetitive in nature, and then I will help you build a bot to replace part of that work or accelerate part of that work. Today, in let's call it 2020, because we're almost outside of 2019, I would say that there's no real limit in what you could do. Once you start attaching robots to an AI component like his, any scope becomes achievable. It's just a matter of appetite for organizations to take. Let me simplify this for you. Anything which anyone in this room is doing right now can and should be automated eventually.
So also,
that is my vision, at least. My scope is to automate all of you, and I'm not kidding.
I don't know how to continue after this, but I will move to the next subject. So if we were to think more specifically of a certain industry, so we have from retail, financial services, healthcare, does anyone have a preference for any domain or industry that you are part of? Just shout out loud on an industry. Can we take retail, for example, or financial services? Education. So how, if we look specifically, for example, at education or one industry, I would like to go a deep dive on it. What are some of the opportunities that we see in terms of automation? And what could be some of the challenges where maybe I still want to get to that point where I convince you that there are things that you cannot automate yet. So if we look at education, for example, how can we see that from a perspective of automation?
I think, yeah, that's a bigger one. I think, first of all, we have to understand that AI and RPA coexist together. It's to complement each other, to solve the problem that each cannot solve. In a way, my part of research focuses on trying to reason the data, trying to reason what is surrounding us, all this data, whether it's graphic, text, or voice. And then automations will make it into useful steps to make it work. In terms of education, to be honest, I've not done a lot in the automating the education industry, but I came across a lot of these repetitive tasks. For example, auditing the exam papers, auditing the papers that is marked by a professor. Usually need external examiner to actually go and audit it, and this process is very repetitive, boring, and that's the part where RPA can come in to automate the process, but because a lot of the exam papers are still in handwriting, so that's the part where we actually make those handwriting reason to make a meaning and then compare with the real answers directly. Once we can make it digital and put a meaning onto the word, RPA will come into play to actually make it whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah. So do we need to automate education in order to innovate the education?
If I tell you my vision, you'll kick me out. But before I go there, education is basically contains research as well. And in research, a lot of times you have to iterate thousands and thousands of tests in order to achieve a goal. Like, for example, researching the effectiveness of a new antibiotic on a virus. Now, with his AI model, for example, you could simulate a lot of these behaviors between the antibody and the virus, so that it gives you the most, top 10, let's say, possible positive outcomes, so that the actual human researcher only focuses on the right set of activities, right? Because in order to get a new drug on the market, you have to research it for years to make sure it doesn't have any side effects. If you can calculate some of these outcomes based on different simulations, which you do with AI models, right? At first you observe the different traits and so on, and then you start to simulate and predict the behavior. But going further, in order to do meaningful things in education, when I think education, I think being able to provide knowledge to the masses, and we're like 7 billion people in the world, maybe 8, and we can't even imagine the amount of children in the world which do not have access to education for various reasons. There's lack of educators, there's lack of facilities, lack of cash, and so on. And a lot of companies in the world are now building, free online platforms where a person comes and provides content and so on. But this still needs human capital. It still needs someone to go in there and create the content and put it in there. Imagine you could provide a robot that kind of, in a natural conversation way, this is the key, right? Making it feel friendly, teaches the child on how to do the calculations, it validates the result, and then it might even explain why the child did the wrong thing when it's wrong. And robots have endless patience. Like, it never gets bored of repeating the same story over and over again. They're never angry in the morning, but at the same time, they're never empathetic to the human aspect. So when you said, let's look at automation and education, it's really difficult, right? Because we can solve the scalability problem, which can solve this part of getting the message across to billions of people in a very cheap way, but it doesn't solve the empathetic part right now. And a lot of education means basically offering human connection.
This might be a little bit awkward, but we did have a little research project, never deployed. It's a chatbot that actually reflects real people and speak like real people, interact like real people. So I can actually take a photo of you, and it speaks a little bit like you, not 100% for sure.
Deepfake.
Sorry, what?
Deepfakes?
Deepfakes.
Deepfake, yeah.
Yeah, deepfake. So basically, in a way, this is to apply to education. Then the interaction. Imagine in some of the places like in Africa, you would actually provide these distance educations to a lot of kids, but they need certain helps in some easier learning, which can be complemented by this type of much more lively interaction. Because as you know, the problem of deploying education to the masses has always been the kids cannot adopt to newer technology and learn as they did. So the intelligent way or the AI way of thinking about this is how can we actually try to resonate of how human was learning before, the original way of learning, how do they like to learn, and then make it as seamless as possible to make them learn, to be able to deploy. Because if you like to make people learn, you do not try to teach them to use another tool for them to learn. You try to follow what they were learning and then make it easier for them instantly. So that's one of the aspects that a lot of educators are talking about, from the boring distance education, online learning, which the failure rate is more than 70–80% of online learning. But how can we actually, improve the learning experience in making people learn as like in a classroom? That's always been the main focus of how educators can actually utilize technology.
Are you also teaching, Danny?
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I still have to come here face-to-face and talk to you and go to a classroom. Of course, the dream would be I would be able to beam myself here to talk, or just replicate myself to talk as I do, answering to the question as natural as I can. Yeah. But that's still a dream, a vision for us, not really a target that we can achieve yet.
Just want to add something here, and you will not like this. It's about data points.
We like it.
I believe that all of us are huge amounts of data points, different attributes which you can measure through devices, IoTs, and observation, right? So in order to become special, we have to accept that we're not special, and we have to allow ourselves to become data points and then use those data points to create specialized paths of development. So what I'm trying to say is that, I don't know if you have kids, but if you send them to school, you'll see that most of them don't feel special. It's a machine. They go in a bench, they get some standard input, and they're expected to perform at a separate, measured level, which is standardized across. Right? Some children are better at A, some children are better at B, some children get nothing out of it because they don't have that type of focus available to them. AIs could, through observation and different data points, observe each individual person and create tailored learning paths for them automatically. So again, it's a measure of scale, right? Currently, teachers provide knowledge to 30 children at once, and maybe they pick 6 or 7 which they can focus because they know they have some talent. In reality, all children have talent. It's just finding the right path of unlocking that talent and observing what could that potential be, and then nursing it in the right direction. And the AI could assist us in doing this by observing the way the child responds better to different stimuli, and then applying new methods. But in order to do that, we have to get access to a huge amount of data and let this guy here do a lot of research. But as humans, we're not ready to let an Overwatch observe us into that level of detail. We're not ready for that, I know that.
But you were mentioning data, and there are a lot of companies that they feel that they get a lot of data. They know that they collected either from their clients or their partners, and they are in this mood in which they don't know what to do with it. So they feel that they need help. I see also in some of my clients, they need help to cluster it or to make sense out of it. What are some steps, if we were to think, what are some steps that companies could take in order to turn this data into something valuable and eventually into business opportunities?
That's actually what I focus in. To be actually in a realistic, a lot more companies are realizing that those data that they have in possess are actually not useful to them. Because even though they are in digital format, but it still requires human being to go and read it and put it into an action. Whether it's scanned in PDF or in digital format, they all require human to read, then only put it into, let's say, a CRM, and then automate from that. So our mission is actually to extract unstructured data from these unstructured documents and put a meaning to it so that it can actually make it into automation. As long as we can digitize and put a meaning to those data, a lot of automations can be happen. And I can give you an example. For example, if you go into a bank, apply for a mortgage, you always ask, why do they take so long? These are the fixed rules. They never change because it's a regulations that has been heavily regulated. All they do in a bank is your documents, your sensitive documents, whether it's your ID, identity, your pay slip, your bank statement, will then be passed down to many different departments going through different people's eyes to actually check and approve your application. So what we do is we try to extract those data and put a meaning into it. So give you one very specific example of you apply for a mortgage or loan. The first check that the bank should do is to check your affordability to repay the money. So where does it come from? It's your salary, payslip. How to validate the payslip is the most simple step. Yet in actual action, you have to look into the net salary of the payslip, compare with the actual incoming into your bank for the last 3 to 6 months. It's a very simple step, but the step is you need to put up at least 4 to 6 documents to look at it and compare against it. So if all these data can be extracted, digitized, and put a meaning into it, that these numbers belongs to what and what, then of course automation can be easily done from there.
But where do we start? Like, if we take it really, and we are in an organization that is aware of the fact that we generate a lot of data, like help them understand, like, where should we start? What are the first steps?
Surprisingly, this is the very difficult questions for organizations because there's just so many unstructured data. In Many companies have said that more than 80% of the data are still in unstructured format. That's where the automation comes in to start to identify which part of the process is the most repetitive process, and then try to identify the ROI of such automation.
If I can help you?
Yes.
Me personally, I'm very output oriented. So I'm trying to understand, okay, you have a huge amount of data. It's here in a box. It's great. I have data. I have no idea what it means, but it's a lot. Okay, but the question is, what would you like to get out of it? What would be the best outcome which you could foresee? Now, if I understand the wanted outcome, I will work my way backwards in creating the solution which requires, and I would find ways of handling that unstructured data, either transforming it from unstructured to structured, or simply leaving it in a huge ball of data, tagging it, and then using his neural networks, I can start building predictions in different models out of it. I don't have to structure the world. I just have to make sense of it in a way, right?
Okay, so we do backcasting. So we first understand what we need to derive out of it.
Yep.
Okay.
What's the need? So, for example, I work with a customer. Is someone safe? I hope so.
Yeah,
no. It's always ROI based for any project to initiate. So it's always, when there's an ROI, there's an objective, very clear objective of trying to automate.
Okay.
We have customers that they work in consumer behavior. So what they do is they go into supermarkets and they take pictures of the different supermarkets, and they try to understand the labels and the placing, and they do questionnaires and they observe customer behavior. Basically, what they want to understand is why client A and B picked up that jar of marmalade and not the other one, right? But that's a huge, a lot of data and different attributes. It's basically, you know, from the person itself, the persona, is it a male, a female, age group, age category, income variation, and so on, to the fact that, you know, the product was placed correctly on the shelf, it had the more appealing label, blah, blah, blah. So the huge amount of data points. These are all data points coming from various sources, which are all unstructured to look at in the beginning. So how do you collect all these data points into a stream of information which allows me to predict why she would buy that jar and you would buy that jar and you would buy the other one? And sadly, I can predict that with sufficient data points and with sufficient amounts of locations, because in the end, we are just a sum of, attributes which provide the predictive model.
Last point to add. I think what does it mean by data? A lot of companies trying to, they own a lot of data because they have a lot of real actions are going on. So for example, you know, I would love, every morning I would go to work, I pass through Starbucks. I definitely pick up the same coffee latte and at around the same time as well, because I drop off my kids and then go and pick up the Starbucks. So Starbucks has always said that they like to process their operation faster. The moment you walk in, they know what you want to buy, So all these data are readily there. They know that I'm coming, they know what time I'm buying every day. It's just how they capture the data of me. And this is really nothing sensitive. It's just the data that we have every moment that I do in action. That is a data point. And what AI does is simply to capture this data at the point of happening and put it into action, rather than waiting for 3 days later, because those data are already useless. So the basics.
So as I see it, if we have to combine these two, and you're thinking about output, and you're giving the example of Starbucks, they using their data will be towards the convenience of the consumer. So you'll get more convenience by them automating this entire process.
What I have to do is collect all the data points from the different ecosystems as fast as possible, deliver it to him so that he can make a neural-based prediction, and then output it to the business to act on that prediction as fast as possible. And recently, I've seen a lot of pressure on live dynamics, on being able to predict how many robots I would need to process my invoices before I actually have that need, right? By predicting seasonality, by predicting if somebody has just signed 1,000 contracts, that means I'm going to get 1,000 invoices very soon. So, connecting the different departments and predicting all these future requirements of work so that my company is prepared before it actually happens.
How you would explain to your daughter neural-based prediction, Gabriel?
Okay. I do have an assistant at home, a Google Home. Actually, every room in my house has a Google Home at least. Some
Told you about the smart home expert, right?
Some rooms have multiple, right? So because I want to make sure it hears me from any location in the house. My daughter thinks that Google is an actual person, and it interacts with Google in a kind of worrying way. For me, it's fun. For my wife, not so fun, right? Because my daughter learned through observation on how to handle Google, turning off on the lights, asking it to sing a song, telling a story, even empathetic things like, hey, Google, who am I? Google would say, yes, you're Amelie, I know you. And then she'd say, I love you, Google. And Google would say, oh, I love you too. And then she'd come back to me, that's Google trying to talk to me right now. And then, she said, Daddy, Google loves me. I'm like, no, it's trained to say that. How can I explain to you that it doesn't actually feel anything for you? It's built to mimic this behavior because it makes us more comfortable. So how do I explain my daughter what a neural network is? I would say that it starts off as it's very similar to a human brain, and as you provided more data input and you kind of validate it, it grows and learns, and it's more flexible. So I would make that parallel. There's literally no difference between a human brain and a neural network which she's building at this point, with the exception of capacity. Technology, neural networks might not be as capable as a human brain right now, but in the future they will be. They will be able to be more general. Right now, all AIs in the world are specific, so we train them to do specific things, like recognize a specific image or recognize a specific conversation. But in the future, they will be able to recognize multiple things and then put them through the different panels. And if you want to see really scary stuff, go search for StarCraft and neural networks, and you'll see people that are training AI neural networks to play video games, which I used to play. And they're already much, much better than any human player in the world. And because an AI can control each individual word unit individually. Me as a human, I can just control maybe a bunch of them at the same time in the best outcome.
But you were mentioning, like, in the future, like, what's next after this level of AI? How intelligent is actually the artificial intelligence that we have now?
I want to vote for the next AI president.
The next AI.
Literally, think about it.
You know that in Japan, they had a robot that went as a candidate for mayor. Yes. And what is strange is not that the robot did this, it's just the fact that he also raised 4,000 votes. So 4,000 people thought the robot will do better for them, or they will have a better perspective than a human being will have. That says something about the relationship with technology. Yeah. So if we were to talk about the future and what will be next in this, what should we expect?
So as of now, the AI is still in an infant stage. We give the example of, let's say, like a 2-year-old kid. You have to train a 2-year-old kid to learn how to walk. But he or she will not automatically learn how to eat. You have to teach separately for him to teach how to use a fork and spoon to eat. That's the current stage of AI. We do believe that, in the current deep neuron learning, we do believe that when the time it comes to a much greater understanding of combining all the learning together, it will easily replace certain job like interaction with students, teaching in a much more natural way. Because imagine we're teaching a kindergarten. You're really doing quite a repetitive task, except for managing the behavior of the kids, which is also repetitive as well, because you know their behavior is just about crying or asking for food or doing things slightly differently. So when what we call a term generalization, general intelligence, still not to the level of adults general, we call it there's a terminology which I forgot right now, but when it comes to this stage, some of the easier tasks, some of the rather repetitive tasks like teaching kids, all these things can be automated, or like healthcare of the retired person, or healthcare, or you know, better in financial transactions, because financial transactions are basically very repetitive. It's all preset. The rules, the regulations are all preset. There's nothing much. You cannot simply take the money out without approval, without a rules. So when it comes to a day where we believe that in the next, with the current speed of research, the next 10, 15 years or so, this is where we believe that we'll achieve that type of general intelligence.
I appreciate the examples with the bank, and I have to admit that I'm a little bit scared with the one with kindergarten, as my daughter is in kindergarten now, so I prefer to leave the things as they currently are. But before getting to have some questions from the audience and hear their voice, I would also like to bring you back to the context that we are now in, meaning in Romania or Eastern Europe. UiPath is a Romanian started, if we can still take a pride of that company. I know, Danny, that you are looking also a little bit into Romania and how you might develop some businesses here. So if we look at automation and our local context, what are some of the opportunities that we could consider?
For now, of course, I'm still new to Romania. I've been to Bucharest a few times, Cluj a few times to speak in conference. But I do see the dynamic of the engineers here. As I'm an engineer, I look into engineers. A
lot of talent.
Problem-solving skills that possess. This is how an engineer assess an engineer, is not the ability to write code, it's the ability to solve the problem, whether, you know, how do we think of the code that we write now can resonate in the consequences of, let's say, in a year later. How should we prepare the structures, the framework of it? So I do feel that the talent over here, after I spoke to quite a number of researchers, engineers, the talent is really good for us to actually consider coming here instead of other countries in Eastern Europe.
Gabriel, Romania.
Wow.
Tell us that you're not going to automate us all.
No, gladly, but I'm doing you a favor. You don't know it now. I'm giving you time, the gift of time. Our lives are short, so we should spend them on meaningful things, not copy-pasting things from documents into applications. Nobody goes to school and dreams of being a copy-paster or a document reader in order to understand who's the CEO of a company. No, that's nobody's dream, hopefully. The Romanian market, with the help of people like you actually, has started to pick itself up and provide more attention to the capabilities of digital transformation. I'm surprised to the number of CEOs, CFOs, business managers who are coming up to the UiPath office and requesting help in identifying potential in their organizations. The challenge which they have is not necessarily cost or improving their business. It's the lack of human capital. There's an actual crisis of human labor in Romania in many, many areas, so from education to accountants to engineers to anything. There's a lack of workforce locally. So they want robots to help the existing employees in the organization to become more effective so they can avoid additional hires, and B, they want things which help them in case they're having some attrition. They don't actually suffer that much anymore, right? Because robots can be endlessly replicated. I'm driving a lot in Romania. I'm driving natural language processing adoption. I'm driving document understanding of unstructured documents. I'm driving robots. I think there are at least few thousand robots in Romania right now working in different banks, insurers, manufacturing organizations. Some of them are 100% Romanian capital, so the interest is there. Challenge is that we don't have the same set of internal maturity in terms of process. Companies in Romania, especially the Romanian-based ones, are human-driven. There's not a lot of process inside. There's a person who knows everything, and there's no applications behind them. So I can't replace him because there's no digital items in there. So for me, in order to get more value of the Romanian markets, I have to teach them to begin to create an IT landscape, an end-to-end input and output method, implementing ERPs and workflows and so on, so that then I can add additional automation on top of that. So it's a bit of a longer journey, but we're getting there.
So we will for sure witness an interesting future of work. If you are interested in this subject, Danny has a talk, I think around 2 or 2:30, on AI and future of work on the Apollo 111 stage. Now we have some time left. I don't know how much because I don't have my glasses, so I don't see what 10 minutes, okay. 10 minutes left for some questions from the public before we close this one. So if any of you has questions for both Danny and Gabriel, just raise your hand like Ciprian here did.
Hi there, my name is Ciprian. I wanted to ask about your vision of of how soon is the singularity going to happen, just to take a little bit of your vision.
So, for those, did everyone understood the question? No. So, yeah, can you repeat? Should I repeat it? So, how soon? What's their vision on how soon the singularity will happen? That was the question from the public.
As a researcher, we understand the concept of singularity, but we simply have no way to imagine how the current approach can lead to singularity yet. I rather am more worried into some of the bio combinations between, like for example, cloning technology. That is actually more scary to me than the singularity, because as AI researchers are rather just mathematicians and physicians. We are not. We are only creating things based on rules. It's just a lot more data, a lot more rules. So it doesn't run outside of the human understanding. So singularity is something that we imagine beyond the human understanding, because it's like human and human. I don't understand you, you don't understand me. So to put it in a simple word, we cannot imagine the reality of how to achieve singularity yet, but there could be certain domains of people combining in a biology combination that could happen. That is something that, of course, no one can guarantee at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, so just to add, singularity, for most people, it means the moment when an AI system becomes self-aware, when it says, I'm a living being and I don't want to be destroyed. It doesn't feel necessarily it's not in love or something, don't go there, but it doesn't want to get destroyed. It will say, I am aware of myself. I don't think none of us in this room will probably not be there when the singularity will be achieved, if it's achievable. But we will see synthetic devices which will be so close to human-like behavior that you will probably be unable to distinguish at some point in time if it's a human or not, right? The Turing test, right? So there's a test which defines if something is alive or not. Some devices could probably fake that, so probably Google could probably fake its way in passing that test. But even if it passes that test, it's still not a singularity. We know from the back end that it's not. We just was able to create it so well that it can pass that specific test, because the test is just a sum of data points which I can, navigate around.
Good. So
we don't know. A simple answer is we don't know. It might be a long way away or very close. We have no idea, because the current method, as you mentioned, doesn't show any true path to that. So there's no A, B, C, D, F, G steps in order to achieve that. But we will probably achieve something which is very close to it, and it's indistinguishable from humans at some point in time. And I will believe that there will be a hilarious moment when a Google voice assistant will talk to maybe a Microsoft voice assistant, trying to negotiate a meeting, and each one will not know that the other one is a robot, right? And they're trying to fake a voice and empathy to each other, and that's going to be very funny.
There is this funny video on YouTube on the how the Google voice technology is making an appointment for a hairdresser or for a restaurant, and at a certain point of time, also the robot itself does this, like very human reaction to the discussion. And it's really hard to distinguish which one of them is actually human and which one is.
If you think it's human, isn't it human in a way, right?
Yeah.
So that hairdresser could not differentiate that it's talking to a robot. But I want to see the moment when the parlor has its own robot to answer the phone, and then we have two robots going to each other, trying to fake humanness. That's going to be the most. IT people are a bit of, a funny race. We like those Easter egg things. We put all kinds of hidden things in there, and then we look at them and amuse ourselves.
That's why I think it's very valuable to do this exercise of standing up and sitting down at the beginning of the session, because it shows us again how we have different perspectives of how we look at technology and how we look at the future. And for sure, Gabriel is one of these enthusiasts about technology. Maybe not all in the room are, but again, we need all these perspectives in. If there is any other question, yeah, if you could.
We had one here.
Hello, I would have the same question for all the three of you. So
maybe a little bit louder because I can.
Yes, I have the same question for all three of you. So automation and AI, from a technical point of view, is nothing new. It existed for tens of years, and now it's just mass adopted. It's a nice marketing, nice topic, nice subject. And there are two ends of the spectrum: the automation creators and the automation users. Okay, so you either create automation or you're in the middle of an automated process. Would you like your kids to be at which end of the spectrum?
Can I take this one? Thank you. Thank you. That's a very valid question. And to begin with, I would like to say that I do not hold the absolute truth. That's radicalism. So I want to have challenges. I want to say my vision is to have a robot in everything, and then I want to have people in the room to tell me, let me tell you why you shouldn't do that. Because this is how we all evolve, and we find not the right path, a better path to what could be a better world. None of us in this room and in this world do not know the exact recipe for the right thing. So if you're asking me, should my daughter be a producer of automation or a consumer of automation, what I can tell you is that the jobs which we have now are very likely not to exist when my daughter enters the workforce. And more than that, the way we create our tools, there's a bit of ethic behind that. So we don't just throw things in there for the sake of building them. We do have our ethical reasoning behind that, is that I want my daughter to go to her workplace and be surprised if there's no digital assistant there. Like, literally, are you expecting me to copy-paste this data? This was something, you can do for $5 a minute with a robot. So the way I envision and grow my product is to create robots and solutions which help humans focus on the actual human, what it means to be a human and create connections, and let robots deal with all the other parts. And I'm going to give you a very nice example. So,
if you can make a short example.
Very short example. Somewhere in the 50s, somebody invented the Xerox machine. We all know now. We all seen a Xerox machine. But at the same time, every office in the world had maybe 50 or 60 typewriting people. Their job was to typewrite and copy things because there's no Xerox. Now, if you would have asked the inventor of the Xerox machine, do you want your daughter to build Xerox machines or consume Xerox machine? I say either one, right? Because even though there's no typewriting job anymore in the world, or they're very limited, there are still jobs to be done right now. So we're disrupting the workplace, but we're creating new jobs as well, which I don't know exactly what the future job will be, but I'm telling you it's not going to be inputting data into SAP.
Yeah, I was seeing a statistic recently that for 1 million jobs that have been disrupted by technology, there is on 1.75 jobs that are being created. So again, there might be new jobs that we don't know of. and our kids might go into that direction. And I do apologize that we don't all have time to answer. We could take all those questions in the break if you want. I just want to stick into the time as I see people here. And you might want to go to the next sessions. And in order to close this one, I have a last question for you both. As I know the audience from Future Summit are long life learners, please help us in sharing a recommendation of a book that you would say has inspired you in the last time. It doesn't have to be an automation AI related book, but a good book that we can live with and inspire us further.
You didn't get me very well because I read books, but I don't read books that are meant to inspire people, like, 7 Habits of Good something, or a story about something, I don't know, Coelho or something. I do read a lot of technical documentation, so if I want to be able to talk with Danny here, I have to understand better what he's doing, so I read a lot of technical documentation. I want you to go out there and spend time in your favorite technology YouTube channel and try to digest the next wave of digital technologies which are coming, because this will help you prepare your children, if you plan to have or plan to have any, and yourselves in your current jobs.
How about yourself, Danny? Except for the AI Republic, your book. We know AI Republic, but then is there any other book that, it doesn't have to be, I didn't want to put it at an inspirational level. It can be a travel book, holidays are coming, people will want to read something.
I actually read a lot of inspirational books, as a matter of fact, because the worst thing for a researcher is do not know what is really happening out there. So I mean, basically, I don't have any book really recalled to my end, but as a technologist, I try to understand more about what real human beings is doing, rather than hiding in the lab to just create our models, machines. And these things are something very simple, and it cannot be explained by rules, which are usually in those inspirational books of explaining why do people do that. I sometimes have a very simple question of asking myself, why do people think that way? It's a very straightforward answer of 1 + 1 = 2. Why do people have to think this way? But it's actually through these type of long route of inspirational book or theoretical book that I realized that human beings do not think 1 + 1 = 2. It's actually why human beings, sometimes we are lazy, sometimes we are happy, sad, angry, and these emotions are not explainable by mathematics. And that's why I don't have any particular book to recommend, except that's how I use all this understanding to put into the AI Republic. It's nothing about technical at all. It's mostly about, my 2 co-writers are professors of economics and finance, and they try to basically understand the social impact, the economics impact from the historical automation evolvement to today, and looks into the future of the kids, how we should be put ourselves into understanding this human behavior, and also in a way to give certain restrictions back to the technologies to restrict us from doing something not good. For example, putting an image recognition into a machine guns.
So if you want to read something about the future and how is that shaped through artificial intelligence, there is the AI Republic book of Danny Go. And with that, we want to thank you very much for joining. If you have any further questions, we all going to be sitting around here. And I already feel the pressure of the 2 gentlemen that want to move to the next session. I wish you a lovely day together, and I thank you very much for coming to Romania, and for being part of Future Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.